then we'll get the other stuff back to you as quickly as possible.
Do we have to prove it in any order of priority, or can we
No.
just have these 11?
I would say these, yeah, I think these are all important.
Do we have a motion? Okay, we have a motion by Cliff,
Second.
second by Mel. Any more discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mike.
Enjoy your holidays.
You
You too.
too.
I think I'll stay and listen to the rest of the town discussion.
Do-
If you have any questions?
You would be willing to answer?
Sure.
Okay, then stay in the hot seat.
That's right.
We'll move along to the next
Okay.
agenda item. And I'll turn this over to Dr. Mandel.
Oh, thank you very much.
Because the rest of us have no clue, we have somewhat of a clue.
The Race to the Top, as you know, is a competitive grant that is part of the AARA funds in Washington, D.C. It's a $4 billion pot of money, and Massachusetts, if it qualifies for its share of the grant, will get $250 million spread out over 4 years, of which at least half has been promised will go to the school districts that sign the memorandum of understanding and sign on to the program. I gave you an MASC briefing paper that I received. I also gave you the document that I got from Commissioner Chester at DESC and a copy of the Memorandum of Understanding. I've done a couple of things. On the Mass Association of School Superintendents listserv, somebody last week asked the question, what are you going to do about the race to the top? And most of the superintendents responded, we're waiting to see what everybody else does about race to the top. A couple of superintendents just came around and said, we're not signing it. And a couple came out and said they were. So there's a lot of ambivalence about what to do with this. Most of the people who were not signing it have said that they have checked with their state delegation and have been told that they're either probably would get no money, or the amount of money they would get would not make the effort worthwhile. I have spoken with the principals, and I have spoken with the other central office administrators. Some of the discussion, especially with the central office people, is if we don't sign the memorandum of understanding and get into the program, are we then cutting off our nose to spite our face? You know, we don't like this, but is it going to somehow or other have an impact down the road? I have spoken with Eric Foreman, who is the president of the North Virginia Educators Association. He has been in touch with the MTA, and basically what the MTA has told their local presidents is this thing is changing as we speak, and so we're not going to give you a recommendation until we have stronger indications of what's going to happen, and he expects that's going to happen either between the week that school is not in session or right after we get back. And I reminded him that if we're going to do this, it has to be done by January 13th, 2010. I was at a meeting on Wednesday morning last week, a consortium, and I was asking several of the superintendents in the consortium what they were going to do about it. And again, most of them said that those that had decided what they were going to do, they were not going to participate because they had been told that they weren't going to get any money, or if the money they got wasn't going to be enough to make it worthwhile. It's something that we have to decide by January 13th, and I don't, you know, the information I have, you have. There's not been a lot forthcoming.
So we don't, excuse me, we don't have to vote tonight, because we have a meeting on the 11th.
You have a meeting on the 11th, that's right.
Mike, what can you tell us?
Well, I think Keith hit pretty much the nail on the head. It's a moving target at this point, and I really don't think we'll have any sort of gelled information from DESE until the 5th or 6th of January, which doesn't give people a whole lot of time to make decisions. One thing is clear, these grants affect more than just the grant period. That there is an indication in the MOU that districts would be required to continue activities beyond the grant. Whether the state will pay for that, whether that becomes a local issue, remains to be seen. And so that and the requirement for collective bargaining in this process says that the school committee must be one of the 3 parties that signs the MOU. That there must be an authorization from the school committee to the chair to sign. The superintendent would sign, and then the local union president would sign, obviously with the concurrence of their membership. So the school committee would have to take a vote to say yes or no, or at least to say yes, to sign off on it. We're sort of having a discussion with our board of directors at this point about what action we believe we should take in terms of advising the membership. And at this point, given the fact that what we're being told is that after the 13th of January, you can't sign on, but if you have signed on, you can pull out, it may be smarter to sign on than not. Because if you decide that it's not worth your while, after January, or you decide it's worth your while after January 13th, you wouldn't be able to opt in.
What about school districts unifying and saying no until we get more information?
Well, remember that this is being driven by the federal government, not by the state. And while we would have liked to have had far more information than we do have, the likelihood of it being forthcoming from Washington at this point are slim and none. I think that if you think it's worth your while, or it may be worth your while down the road, first of all, I would wait until the 11th. I wouldn't take a vote tonight. But in fact, my own committee has a meeting on the 13th, and we will probably wait until the 13th to make that decision. I know that the department is going to hold some sort of drive-by meetings, at least one anyway, with the commissioner, probably around the 5th or 6th of January. And at that point in time, we may have more information. I would say if we don't have more information at that point in time from the department, it is likely that we'll have a lot of folks who will say no.
What it's not is money being sent to school districts so we can maintain our staffing levels for all those areas that we're bleeding in. From what I could gather, it's a very specific grant that looks to collect data from some pilot programs that are testing teaching skills. So there's professional development component and some curriculum when to introduce some subject matters. And I know that our frameworks and our ed reform tie into that. But from reading it, it just looked like something that's creating jobs, creating studies, information that's good for down the road and the future of education. But I don't see it doing anything for where we are right now.
There are a lot of collective bargaining issues in this for states that are collective bargaining states. There's pay for performance in here and evaluation based on performance, how you do that in this collective bargaining environment. I don't know. I don't know that it's something that any of our suburban communities are going to be able to get done in the short window we have to do it.
Yeah, I have no understanding of how, when we, for example, have a 3-year contract in place and we're in the first year, that we're going to get our education association to say, you know what, we'll just rip up that contract and let's just decide we're going to have, pay for play. Or that's number one. Number two, I find interesting, and I don't understand why this is, but for the memorandum of understanding, the only two required signatures are the superintendent of the district and the authorized state officials. The other two signatures, it says if applicable. Now, what exactly does that mean? I've
Well,
tried to get an explanation of
Here's the
that.
reason why. In Massachusetts, school committees have control over the budget.
So it is
So
applicable?
it is applicable.
Okay, so
Okay.
they are required in
Yes.
Massachusetts?
Yes.
And the union would also be required in
Yes.
Massachusetts?
And then there are states that, believe it or not, don't have collective bargaining, so they would not be required to have union sign-off.
If all three have to sign.
Yes.
For state
Or the
officials.
Well, the state, yeah.
So I just echo what Maureen says, yeah, I read through, and I don't, I think that a lot of what this Race to the Top grant is trying to do is commendable, but much of it doesn't apply to a district such as North Reading. I'd like to see us be able to get money so we can restore our computer labs to be open full-time in our elementary libraries, rather than get money to, look at new things and new data to measure teacher effectiveness and et cetera, and then there's a whole part of it that has no application to us right now, which is the area in terms of failing schools, schools in category 4 and 5, I think it is. So I read through this, and as Maureen says, what I see is we'll have to hire people to implement these things, and we'll basically get little or no value out of
Yeah.
it. But at the same time, I sit here saying, what does the town think if the school committee sits here and says, we don't want your rotten money, I mean, so what kind of position are we in? Personally, I read through this, and I've read through it several times now, and I just don't, it's gonna be hard to convince me to support this.
I'm already not supporting it. I mean, this is one of the worst written requests for proposals I've ever seen, and I'm in healthcare grants. This, to me, looks like throwing a bunch of money at doing projects so the government can say, wow, look at all the great things
Look at all
we're
the money
doing.
we're spending,
We're
right.
spending tons of money on education. We're not getting it done. We're not getting it done for our communities, our kids, our parents, everyone that's involved in our school district. This does not address the problems we have. And while I would like to be innovative, because I'm a huge supporter of pay for performance, that's not our reality here. It's not our reality. I would vote no on this today, and
We don't have that achievement gap problem.
Right.
yeah.
And if, as I looked at it, each of the things that they were trying to accomplish, they already have in place.
Exactly.
It's basically, we're there already. Now, well, there were some things that I thought we could perhaps build a program around. Things like an expanded library system.
Yeah.
Since we don't have a librarian.
Right.
That would be an addition that we could put in that would be helpful. And on the technology side, certainly we could do wonders with some help to sponsor technology element. The question I have really is, are we going to be able to have that flexibility to design our own program around our own thing? And it doesn't look to me like we can. It's like we have to participate in somebody else's development of a criteria, a curriculum that will be universally used across the state, and which will then lockstep us into something we don't care to be in. Because we're doing just fine like we are right now, and we are being successful like we are right now. So and on the other side of it, I'm looking at, well, I don't really want the state to be held back from getting any kind of assistance. All the money goes to Washington. Let's get as much of it as we can coming back
Close
this
to the
way. And if it hits the state, maybe it doesn't do anything for our town, but if it helps the state, then maybe they'll be able to send some more money through Chapter 70 at us. It's just kind of a backhanded way to perhaps help the funding
I think
program.
that's part of the frustration with me, is we have a broken Chapter 70 formula.
Yeah.
That I don't see any progress being made toward fixing that, and yet I'm being asked to vote to get money that I don't think we need for programs I don't think we need. So I just, it's gonna take, as I said, it's gonna take a lot of convincing to get me over to the other side on this.
This falls, from my standpoint, it falls kind of in the position of like an election. And, you know, your elections